All right, welcome to the Murmur Podcast, everybody. Thanks for joining us. If you like what we're doing, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to get some updates. I'm Brian Rowley, one of the co-founders of Murmur, and as always, I'm joined by my mom, who is...
I am the mom, and I'm Rochelle Davis, the other co-founder of Murmur Impact. Murmur Impact connects progressive organizations with a progressive generation to create social change. We focus on closing the communication gap that exists between progressive efforts and Gen Z.
And on today's podcast, we are joined by a very interesting and very amazing guest. Reggie Hubbard is the founder and chief serving officer of Active Peace Yoga. And actually, Mom, you discovered him at Netroots Nation, so why don't you tell us why you were so excited to talk to him today?
Well, as Brian, I've been doing yoga for a long time, and I have been an activist for a long time, but never before have the two parts of me met. And when I went to Reggie's meditation class at Netroots, I was just so inspired and excited to see how he took this practice of yoga and meditation and integrated it so much into social change, and really how he connects the need, the journey, the effort to be personally healthy with transforming our country, our society, our world into one that is, it sounds a little corny, but more founded on goodness and on love and on well-being. And I just enjoyed the conversation with him so much, and I'm sure you will too, even if you're not a yogi.
Yeah, there's something for everyone. All right, well, let's get started. Let's hear from him, and yeah, thanks for watching. Reggie, thank you for joining us. We're very excited, and I know my mom specifically is very excited to chat with you because she got to witness your greatness at Netroots. I didn't, but I heard all about it. Trust me.
Seriously.
So, Mom, do you want to ask him the first question since this is your star guest? Do you want to just praise him for a little bit?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was just so great to go to a conference where there was the opportunity to do meditation during the day, and where the meditation was so connected to the politics. And I've been doing yoga for a really long time. I actually started with the Jane Fonda's first yoga record and book.
Nice. Yes.
Where you would literally look at every picture in the book while you had it on your record player.
Yes. Yes.
So that really dates me, and it has just been a really important part of my life since then. And I'm kind of happy to say that a lot of my family members, they used to make fun of me, but a lot of them have taken up yoga, and we actually even had a yoga shower for my sister-in-law a number of years ago. So, and my mom was there on a chair, and my mom is 89, and she now goes to a yoga class every Wednesday. And she is standing and walking. So,
right, for sure.
But I was really, really excited about that connection to the connection that you made to all of us there on the politics, on our commitment to work on politics, and the need to do it with an open, loving heart, and the need to do it in a way that takes care of ourselves. And as I researched your background, you really went from a high-level political advisor to a yoga maven, and I would just love to understand your journey.
Yeah, so again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you and to just talk about these sorts of things in general, but specifically for the audience that is younger. And I appreciate that because Honestly, I'm sick of talking to old folks. Old folks are boring the shit out of me. You know what I mean? Like they're boring me because they don't want to change and they're wrapped up in fear. And it's young folks are, I've noticed, wrapped up in dread and existential crisis. And I majored in existential philosophy, so I've been brooding for about 35, 40 years. And so I'm well seasoned in the psychological disposition of the day. So to answer your question specifically, I still do political advising. It's just without the toxicity. I did politics hardcore at the presidential level from around 2003 to 2009. And in that time, I went from the best shape of my life to the worst. I started politics after the Iraq War began, like for real, and left a sabbatical in Rio de Janeiro to fight the good fight, and did so with 18-hour days and chain smoking for breakfast with a bourbon sidecar and working 18-hour days and all that. And precipitously declined in my physical and mental well-being, right? And like, I mean, obviously, but that's the culture. American political culture, both political and activist, embraces masochism and self-destruction. And I luckily saw the game around the midpoint of my career, and I was like, if I continue doing this shit, like I might not make it to 40. You know what I mean? I got sugar on one side of my family. That's diabetes for you non-Southern folks, and heart disease on the other side of my family, like heart attacks. And I was like, if I don't do something, like this ain't gonna end well. So around 2014, so about 10 years into the political game, 2013 actually, I made a vow that my health and well-being was sacred. So non-negotiable. And that meant that I turned some things down. That meant that I would have to walk away from some things. But I've never regretted making my health and well-being sacrosanct. And like that intentional decision in 2013 begat my yoga and meditation practice, begat my stewardship of the progressive movement, and now has begat a bit of a teaching practice that is a unique hybrid of giving peace to activists, but also for the people who sit on their cushion and don't do shit. Like we light fires under them because Rome is burning. Pick up a bucket and stop sitting. It's just stupid.
How quickly were you able to like fully make that commitment, right? That your health and well-being was paramount. Because there's one thing to make the decision mentally, but then to actually turn a job down, right? Like that's an action that, frankly, I think probably frightens so many people because of a variety of reasons. So I'm just curious, like, about, you know, was it immediate for you? Were you like, I'm in, or was there a transition period? And what?
Oh, I mean, so I quit smoking cold turkey.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? I was like, I'm not doing this shit anymore, and this stopped, right? Knowing full well that that's not the way most people are made. I totally understand that. And with this health and well-being commitment, I did a 6-month vegan cleanse, man. You know what I mean? I was just like, I'm deconstructing everything. And it's a commitment, man. You know what I mean? You know, like Malcolm X, to paraphrase Malcolm X, like you either mind your wellness or you mind your illness, man. Like you gonna pay attention to it one day. You know, so to make it priority is essentially undercutting the opportunity for serious injury, mental or physical. It's good stewardship in the context of activism. If your body falls apart, you can't do the work you're so passionate about. If your mind falls apart, there's no way you can do the work that you're passionate about. So it's actually, from a strategic standpoint, your best energetic investment is taking care of yourself, because these are the tools that you have to actualize the work that you care about. And they're not infinite.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a conversation now, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir in this one, but about the sustainability of this work requires self-care, right? Absolutely. I think that's, and Mom, you could probably speak to this better because you started organizing in the late 60s, not to date you, or the late 70s, late 60s, 72? When
I
was
did
Midwest
do this-
Academy? 72?
but I did an organizing drive in 8th grade to make sure
Okay.
that girls could wear
Sorry.
pants. And that was 1970, maybe
Nice.
So-
72.
So the conversation was not around self-care back then, right? That wasn't an item that folks talked about. So I'm just curious, like, Reggie, from your perspective, just like, how does this make people better change agents? How does this make the struggle actually not the struggle,
Right.
or at least reframe what the struggle part is?
Yeah, two comments on that. One is that I don't look at activism as a fight anymore. It's a dance. Right? It's a sacred It's a sacred opportunity I have to reimagine the world that's better for all people. Right? As a recruiter and as an organizer, it's so much easier to recruit people to a dance. Right? It's so much easier to recruit people to something that's fun as opposed to the fight. Yeah, the fight, sure. No fucking shit, I'm black in the United States. But what I do now is, I'm still doing this work, but with a bit of a playful edge. And so that's the first thing, shifting the frame, and that's not to diminish the seriousness of the work, but it's the way that you ingest external circumstance, right? If you ingest it as a fight in your mind, cortisol levels raise, blood vessels constrict, breath shortens, and that's not a regenerative posture, right? But and Rochelle, you saw this potentially in Chicago. I had to deconflict a protest, right? On the spot. And I couldn't do that from constriction. I don't remember much that happened because it was just so energetically intense. But I do remember trying to protect Pramila Jayapal, Jan Schakowsky, and Chuy Garcia, who I know from my work on Capitol Hill. And when I did that, the protesters started screaming at me. And I don't remember much that happened after this, but I put my hand on my heart. I came up in all whites, a Kango, barefoot, because I needed to be hella grounded, and I had a gong in my hand because I was just if you're gonna bring noise, I'm gonna bring sacred noise. You can't out noise me. I'm gonna have to get mystical and witchy on you for a second. But when they started screaming at me, I felt that. I put my hand on my heart, took the deepest breath in the world, opened my eyes, and went to work. And didn't miss a moment, you know what I mean? And was able to hold space for their protest with respect. It was just I have no idea what happened because I was so present. But I could not have been present because I could have been this totally sucks. But I was just bring it. And so the next thing, if I ever talk about this publicly, I'll be if someone if you start yelling at someone and they put their hand on their heart and their eyes get big, watch out.
Can you talk a little bit, because I think that's such an interesting. My mom was live texting me this moment, so I'm somewhat aware, and it's this was
Wow.
right. This was an intense. This was some well-respected congressional folks,
Absolutely.
policymakers who, for the most part, are pretty good on their progressive credentials.
Absolutely.
And then a legitimate concern among people. These are the tensions that we play with every single day, especially on the progressive side, where it is this, to use a cliche, big tent, and there are contradictions that don't necessarily mean there's evilness and we got to work through that. And it seems like you connected to something on how to work through that in that moment, whether you knew it or you found it,
It's
during
probably
it.
a little bit of both.
Yeah, but I would just love to hear more about I don't know if it's the lesson you learned from there or what should folks take away from how we can
I gave the
even
opening-
broaden it to those conflicts. Yeah.
I gave the opening keynote, and I kind of got a tip that the protest was happening, and so I spoke very assertively in support of Palestine and all oppressed people, right? Because I'm a member of an oppressed caste as an African American male in the United States, right? And so I have solidarity with all oppressed people. So rather than focusing on one group, I said all folks, LGBTQ, black and brown, those who are tortured by the state, we support, and in this moment especially Palestinians. So I said that full throated, got an applause line, as I should have, whatever. I also said, like, if we're going to be successful in our movement, we need to learn to disagree agreeably. And if we have a falling out, we can fall back in with grace. Right? Because, when I came back out on stage, I essentially felt like someone's old uncle being like, so y'all didn't listen to what I said earlier? Like, what part of falling back out and falling in with grace don't you understand? You know what I mean? And that wasn't disrespectful, but as an elder, as a graybeard in this hustle, I got scars that are older than you, homie. Right? And so, like, I came at it from that perspective. So that's one thing I'll say, is that, like, shouting at your enemies undercuts all the progress. Your perceived, and this is where mindfulness and meditation help me, like, the enemy that you perceive as your enemy could be your ally, and could be an asset to you for some of the work that you do. Mindfulness gives me the opportunity to bear witness to the truth that sometimes your perceived enemy can be your ally. Your feelings, while visceral, aren't always true. Right? So your anger, while justified from a strategic standpoint, as someone who used to be consumed by anger for 25 years, anger over time is corrosive and destructive. And so I said this when I was deconflicting the protest, they were screaming these things, and it was anger. It wasn't logic. You know what I mean? Stop the plot, like sign the bill now. Logistically impossible, homie. Congress isn't in session. What's next? You know what I mean? We want a meeting. Schakowsky said she'd give you a meeting. Her staffer's over there. What's next? You know what I mean? So it's just like, so your anger, while justified, is also infringing upon the freedoms of other people who didn't come here to see this. You know what I mean? And so, like, what I did in the deconflicting, I was like, for those of you who are silent, why are you abdicating your agency? You can politely say, we've heard you. You have been heard. May you leave the room now. That is well within your right to do so. Like, you can ask someone to take a seat if they have been heard compassionately. You don't have to sit there and, like, you aren't undercutting their movement. They've overstayed their welcome.
And Reggie, I just think so much, I've done a lot of work in the last 20 years to promote healthy school environments, and there's been a lot of focus on mental health, and it's pretty clear that our educational institutions did nothing to build up people's emotional skill development. And I'm not even sure there was a recognition that there was skills related to emotional development.
For sure.
And, I'm very glad to see schools beginning to address that with both restorative discipline, but, meditation. I use 3 deep breaths with my 3.5-year-old granddaughter when she, either gets too excited one way or the other. It works
like
sometimes,
right.
not every time, but, hopefully that will be a skill that she is going to learn. And then let's just go back to the debate that happened on Wednesday night. And, and even going back to when Donald Trump ran the first time and was a bully. And we actually heard from teachers around the country that this kind of behavior that was now happening on the national stage was being emulated by young people. And
totally.
Somehow the debate that happened, and it was pretty predictable, was about demeaning people and, each other and yelling at each other. And we were just kind of have a lot of people who have really have trouble to let their best selves out and to interact in places of conflict or disagreements in a way that is, as you say, allows you to get back in and, get out with some grace. And I'm just kind of wondering, I mean, you talked in your TED talk about the power of the purposeful pause.
Mhm.
And in my mind, it's like a skill that people don't know how to do. And I guess if you could just say a little bit more about what it is and whether it's connected to what I've just.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm uniquely qualified to talk to the anger issue. As like I said, anger was my native tongue from probably 13 to 38. And it's funny for people who just meet me, they're like, "You're so peaceful." I was like, "You have no idea." Like how hard I worked to get here, but B, just below the surface, I will burn you. You know what I mean? Like that is ever present. So it's a consistent decision sometimes for me not to let anger take hold. So in the context of what you're talking about, right? Um, there are also people. I'm one of the folks that are pushing this. During the debate, during the Republican debate, I held a sangha called Election Protection. And we had 35 people virtually taking deep breaths and holding space for hopes and dreams as they were talking. Like, I have no desire to watch that shit. You know what I mean? Like, I have no desire to feed my limited energy in this incarnate form with that. And so I also have no desire to bear witness to people inflicting harm on themselves, thinking that that's the only option that they have. And so, like, as a teacher, as someone who has taken vows to alleviate suffering and to confront like ignorance head on, like, I was just like, you have a choice here. You can like watch Fox and hate your life and talk about what you're afraid of, or you can talk about what you're afraid of with a group of like heart-filled citizens who are in this world changing it, and invest not only in the liberation of your fears, but the transformation of the world based on your compassion. And we had 35 people and we had a great time, and people were just like, I didn't know this was possible. I was like, I'm so counterculture that it's delightful. You know what I mean? So usually if society's focusing on one thing, you can find me doing the exact opposite. Right. So like in this time, and this is where my Buddhist practice comes in to be very helpful, because it's impermanence, right? Like, this isn't going to last forever. It'll only last as long as we sit and watch it and allow it to last. Right. And so, I mean, my teaching practice is also a perfect example of that. I wasn't teaching 3 years ago. I didn't see a place for it. The pandemic like ripped down the veil between like access for big body people, big body black people. And while everyone was clutching their fear, the peace of my practice allowed me to launch Active Peace. And, then George Floyd was murdered a couple months after that. And I was like, I make a vow to speak on behalf of people who can't speak for themselves, and to destroy norms within the yoga space that keep us out. And I've been doing that ever since. And so what I'm saying here is that both things are equally true, right? It's equally true to be fearful and angry and demeaning, but also in the infinite nature of the universe, there's capacity to build compassion, to build patience, to build discernment, to build wisdom, but it's what we focus on. And so I've taken up the mantle as activist, but also as teacher, of being a role model of the exact opposite. Because, these norms that are perpetuating, quite honestly, have been used to stifle people who look like me. And I ain't going back to that stuff. Like that brother in Montgomery, Alabama, like you come at me with some racist stuff, you're catching a chair and my wisdom practice.
And I guess, Reggie, to just focus a little bit on personal well-being and racism. We certainly know that there are enormous health disparities in this country, and that racism is pretty well embedded, well, in almost every institution, but particularly in institutions that relate to our health. Um, and there, it is understandable why you, as a 13-year-old boy, might feel a lot of anger, and because of, and you might not have even totally understood. I don't know at what point you developed this understanding about racism in our country. And I guess I wanted to get your take on this intersection of personal well-being and racism, and I'm really interested in this personal responsibility versus the societal responsibility. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you balance, because you don't want to be telling people who are angry that they don't have a right to be angry. So how do you balance that, if you can understand my
For sure.
question
I
in there?
mean, one of the things that mindfulness training has given me is the ability to hold space for complicated situations, right? And so, again, I tell people often, I was like, you have every right to feel angry. It is also your responsibility what you do with that feeling. So whether your anger is justified or not does not like set you free from the consequences of your action based on the feeling, right? So and that's challenging because it took me a long time, and that's another reason why I talk so much, and I'm very forward about racial stuff. The reason that anger thing showed up when I was 13 is because my guidance counselor asked me where I wanted to go to college, and I told her Princeton, and she told me, statistically speaking, you may not even get into college, so maybe try community college. I mean, I was class secretary, like I had like a 3.6, and so the only reason you told me that, ma'am, is there's only one reason you told me that, right? So it lit a fire in me. I mean, I went on to be class president for 3 years after that, went to Yale and all this other stuff, right? And so like it just lit this fire where I was just kind of like, rah, right? But again, like I told you, in my early 30s and mid 30s, that using anger as a catalyst for self transformation is a dead end proposition, right? And I had to learn two things. One, that while my anger is justified, my usage of it as fuel and a catalyst is killing me. One. Two is that there are ways to take anger and transmute it to your advantage. Here's what I mean by that. I now regularly teach minority young folks. I was like, look, you got to learn how to use white supremacy to your advantage. What do you mean? Things shouldn't be this way. Totally hear you. Totally hear you and totally agree. And when it comes up, if you don't have a mechanism to deal with it, you're going to perpetuate the anger cycle and self-destructive tendencies that they want you to perpetuate. So I used to get upset when people would question my intelligence. Now I just come in understated. You know what I mean? Like if you didn't do your homework and see that I'm trilingual, went to Yale, and I'm a sought after speaker, that is your fucking fault. If your racism wants you to stereotype me because of my disheveled look or my stature, then that just means that victory is closer for me. Right? And so what that requires is detaching yourself from expecting that a system steeped in racism is going to look out for you, and begin to create systems that look out for you and look out for other people.
So I think that I want to kind of pursue a little bit this individual versus the kind of system policy
Yeah.
level.
Hmm.
I, as I think about this move that you certainly represent, and others are trying to do it, in terms of changing curriculum and this focus on individual responsibility for dealing with your anger and your well-being versus kind of society's responsibility for creating systems that don't hurt us all. And I, I feel like on the one hand, I worry that this emphasis on individual responsibility, which, is important, will reinforce the myth that you can just pull yourself up by your bootstrap. Just do that. Why don't you do that? And on the other hand, the beginning recognition about trauma and its impact on people, on generational trauma, maybe allow us to, as a society, rethink affirmative action, rethink reparations. And so how do you think about, like, just this general idea of helping people focus on individual responsibility and have the government fund helping people do that, with kind of the potential upside and downside in the political realm.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you how I go about it. So, a couple months ago, I taught the first ever healing retreat for black men at Kripalu Institute of Yoga and Health in Massachusetts. Had 20 black men from all identities. So there were queer couples there. There was a straight man with a trans femme. Like there was just everything, right? Like alpha male and like artsy, everything. And we taught individual responsibility in the context of community. So as I heal myself, I can hold space for you. Right. So for me, again, and maybe this is the difference between like master culture, pull yourself up by your bootstraps on the capitalist patriarchal myth, as opposed to community care rooted in individual responsibility. Like that's what I'm talking about. So you are individually responsible to yourself, but also to others. And in the context of the government, the government and systems are made up of people. So if I, as a teacher, teach people how to have a deeper understanding of themselves and their connection to one another, over time, it stands to reason that that might yield policy change. Like if we don't change the individual hearts and minds of others, we can't expect policy change, right? Like so, and as an organizer, it's one person by one person by one person by one person over time. That's a lot of people, right? So and the other thing too is that there's an element of truth that's missing in our society. Like people don't believe that black people were like, what's that dumb shit that like the devil DeSantis said? Like slavery was beneficial to black people.
Yeah. They learned some things that could also help them.
Yeah,
I think is the,
like
is the
liberation.
exact line.
Yeah, we learned revolution, man. Like we learned liberation.
Right.
Right. Like we learned that like in order for us to take care of ourselves, we've got to like put you down, man. You know what I mean? Like and stand up for ourselves. So the prevailing there's a struggle in our society right now between things as we want them to be and things as they have been. And in order, that's a part of the reason why I enjoy talking to youth is because, like I told y'all at the beginning, I'm tired of talking to old people, you're stuck in your ways. But like, it's kind of like an organizing hack to inspire youth. Right, because y'all are gonna become older, and I just hope you remember I was kind to you when you were young, and when you do policy changes, that you remember that I gave you the strategic imperatives to like get it done. Right, so the only way that society and the states will heal is through radically confronting what has happened. There is unfortunately a significant number of people that are unwilling to do so. And in the absence of their willingness to do so, it's imperative for people like myself to remind you that things are changing and have changed whether you like it or not. That's why I said, like, I'm a peaceful man, but let one of these rednecks come up to me and try and, like, tell me boy, you need to do something, like, you better be careful, man. We're not scared of you anymore. Like, the beauty to me of what happened in Montgomery, Alabama, is that like black folks could stand up and protect themselves without fear of being killed.
Right. And the cops arrested the white guys.
Absolutely. That's not common, man. You know what I mean?
No.
We're not as far away from public lynchings as we'd like to think of as a society. Right? And so there has to be, among all of us who seek truth, justice, and liberty, a level of connection to not just our individual well-being and collective responsibility, but a determination to speak truth to power, being like, we're not going back to that. Nice try. But like, yeah, and you may have won the battle, but the war, brother, is going to be filled with dancing on like the failed policy of your supremacy. Like, we're not playing this, man.
I just feel, particularly with the indictments against Donald Trump, I don't understand how how we as a society resolve this when people are so, un, I'm really worried about what
Sure.
happens
Yeah.
should he get convicted, and what happens should he not get convicted, and what's the process we have to come back together. Like, we don't have one. I actually really worry about that.
Yeah. Well,
um, and I'm just curious your perspective on that, because something's going to happen one way or the other over the next year.
but it's not something we can predict. First of all,
Of
so I
course.
mean, so that is not to dismiss what you're saying and what you're feeling, but we can't predict that, right? And so, thinking things will go one way, thinking things will go, we don't know. One, but two, there's tremendous agency that happens in a year. Like, what conversations can we have about building a process to deal with this? Like, what reconciliation can we seek now to mitigate a potentially disastrous future outcome, right? The energy spent thinking about what could happen or what might happen can be spent building something that we want to happen, right? And, just to be very honest, like, delusion is a root cause of suffering. And there is no way out of delusion other than radical truth and determination in living that truth. And so it stands to reason that there could be an awful outcome because people still want to hold on to, like, one of my friends just texted me, Donald Trump is Jefferson Davis 2.0. You know what I mean? Like, or Jefferson Davis 3.0. We are still, as a society, grieving the loss of the Civil War. The South has not gotten over the fact that black people are free and that they lost. Let's just be very honest about that. And until that happens, there will be this conflict. And at the same time, there are people who are heirs to the legacy of that victory that need to be empowered and encouraged. You see what's happening in Georgia. The same demographics exist in Mississippi. Mississippi is 40% black,
Right.
But they just don't vote. So, like, there are fundamentals in the ecosystem. North Carolina, like, has significant numbers of transplants and black people that, if organized, will flip the state, right? And so while worry is honorable, there's also conditions that exist to continue to push that stuff in the past. And, like, I hold compassion. I said this and it blew somebody's mind. I was like, I have tremendous compassion for people for whom their worldview was built on a lie, and you are bearing witness to the lie, and the only thing that you think you can do is control in a world that is impermanent and where control is an illusion. So I have compassion for that. And at the same time, I don't have compassion for the feelings that you have because I'm trying to make them more acute. Your delusion and your unwillingness to let go of supremacy and norms that have suppressed women and indigenous people and immigrants and people of color, like your unwillingness to atone for that mortal sin of the past, you can't outrun that forever. Like, the bill always comes due. And so, given the energetics of the moment, I believe there are enough people. I mean, we're seeing it now. Like, they thought they could attack the Capitol and get away with it. Proud Boys brother got 30 years. Take a seat, fam. Take a seat. You earned that seat. Yeah, no pardons, dog. You know what I mean? But Trump just got booked with 18 other people in Georgia. Whether he gets prison time or not, the system, while imperfect, is still doing its job. That gives me tremendous hope. And because I live in the D.C. area, like, we watched on TV as I used to live in the Capitol. The majority of my job was in the Capitol. They thought they could get away with storming the Capitol. Didn't happen. Yes, it takes time, but there's always an opportunity, and we survived that. The government, like, survived a coup attempt.
Right.
that resiliency exists not just in policy, but it exists within us. So while we may not have a plan, we do have the resources within to endure as we have for the past several hundred years.
And I think that gets to the sustainability argument from a self-care, right? This battle is not going to end in 2024. It won't end in 2028. And
Neither
it
will
won't
the
end
dance.
Right, sorry, the dance. I want to use I like the dance. The dance won't end.
Yeah.
And so we gotta be there for the long run, right? Because it takes that consistent movement, that consistent progress. So I think
you
makes what you're saying even more important, frankly.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point too, because I think that I mean this with the kindest way I can say it. I think that the movement is so egocentric that they forget that you may not see the results of your labor.
And that's not the point.
Yeah, exactly. The point is to create conditions for mutual thriving and transformation. Martin Luther King didn't see what he worked for, among other people. So the sacrifice that's required, and not from a diminishing perspective, but doing this work, hoping that you see the results. But solely for that, that's going to lead to disappointment. And that leads to a short-sightedness that my job, for as long as I draw breath, this is where my Buddhist practice helps me out. I'm not living forever. So while I'm here, I'm trying to share as much with you as I can, because this is bigger than me. Yes, I'm doing some epic stuff, but like this incarnate is not going to live forever. So I'm doing all this stuff. I'm telling you all this stuff. I'm helping people as much as I can, because I hope that what I plant will grow and other people can either be nourished by it or steward the garden.
Do you have a question, Mom?
Well, you talked about what gave you hope. What inspires you? What gives you inspiration?
As crazy as it sounds, like the anger of those youth in Chicago inspires me, because you care, right? If you care, I can teach you how to care better. That's what the grays in this beard are for. I can teach you how to care better, easier than I can teach you to give a shit.
Yeah.
Right? So the anger, the outrage of youth, but also the hope that I have a half sister who's 20 years old, and just her worldview is so beautiful, right? So she's biracial, and all these different intersections, and these kids are just living in a world that is just fluid and loving and delightful. Take that, Tucker Carlson. But they're living they're living in a world that is diverse, that's gender fluid, that is loving and compassionate. And it's just older folks who are stuck in the past. Y'all just got to get out of the way, right? Like that gives me hope. Another thing that gives me hope is my story, right? You know what I mean? Like my story gives me hope because my grandmother, who I still have at 96, it was difficult for her to vote in Southern Virginia. Her grandson used to have regular conversations with Nancy Pelosi during the resistance against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Right? The arc of the universe, like if we are diligent with our work, trends towards justice. Martin Luther King said that. The thing that I often add to that, with humility for adding to the elders' words, is that we have to bend the arc.
Yes.
Our job is to and if it's not, I'm like, hey man, Brian, I need you.
Yeah.
Like Rochelle, I need you. Like I got this. And we.
No. It's an important add-on. It's not a gravitational pull that bends it. It's people.
Yeah.
It's people working, and to your point, not seeing the end of the bend, right? Like not, it's just playing their role in the bend. And I think the thing that to the young folk conversation is like that's the proof that what we saw on the debate stage yesterday or whenever that was 2 days ago isn't gonna win.
Right.
Because there's no delegation under 25 for that rhetoric, for that insanity.
Climate change is a hoax.
Yeah, they're just, it's a non-starter for Democrats, Republicans, however you identify if you're under 25. It's a non-starter. They're not buying into that.
Yeah.
It's not going to, now it's crazy. The youngest person on stage is the one that said it, but he's full of shit. So we don't need to take him seriously. He's cosplaying Donald Trump right now. I mean, he doesn't believe what he's saying.
Yeah.
He's playing a role for real.
But I think that's the sort of, so I guess my question to you, because and is sort of in that framing of young people, like, I do think that they're growing up in a world in which anger is the currency.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
like, a lot of it came out of fear and anger of Donald Trump. That sparked, I think, a lot of and fear and anger around George Floyd and fear and anger around so many.
On a coronavirus, like, if I breathe someone else's air, I'm going to die. What?
I mean, climate, right?
Right. There's like
That's a fear issue.
There are 4 whammies.
Yeah, and then they grew up in a world with social media algorithms that are biased
Predatory.
towards exactly, and that are biased towards engagement and incitement, and so they're facing this. I think they're facing this way worse than my generation. I'm 38, or 37, 38, one of those ages.
Yeah.
Way worse than my generation, and I think older. I think it's amplified. It's just so amplified for them, and it comes so quickly. And so, like, what advice do you find yourself giving folks that are younger, that are starting to get into the dance, to keep them focused and centered or whatever?
So the first thing I often offer, I've never said that before, it's pretty funny, is that get in touch with nature, like, not on like some hippie stuff, but like feel your feet on the ground. The sun rises and sets, right? Like, so there is a cadence to this thing called life that is over and above anything that any of us are doing, right? And so rooting yourself in something larger than yourself is essential for your mental health and well-being, number 1. 2, from a demographic standpoint, you got the numbers, right? I used to play poker back in the day. If I had that hand, man, ooh, right? If I was sitting on 5 aces, right?
Yeah. You got the cards, man.
How the Joker get in here? Who cares? I got 5 aces, man. Like, take that royal flush. You know what I mean? Like, so, like, you're sitting on aces, man, and like, play the hand. And if you don't play the hand, ask for help playing the hand, right? Like, you're sitting on numbers, you're sitting on the issues, and the other thing I would say is not everyone who's older than you is against you. Right? Like, trust me, like, as someone who was younger that hated older people telling them what to do, totally dig it. Like, and still now, my poor girlfriend, she'll say something to me and I'm like, I just don't respond well to being told what to do. Like, that's just how I am. However, there's sometimes when you soften that reflex a little bit and just listen, like, some things may land. I mean, I often, when people say something to me, I often don't tell them, be like, yeah, that was right. It's not my business to tell you that you're right. You knew you were right. I just had to figure that out. That's another thing I would say. And lastly is that we're in this together, whether we like it or not. And to that end, when I say we're in this together, we share joys and sorrows, right? We share victories and defeats, knowing that over time, as we create deeper connection, the narrative shifts. I mean, in some of the criminal justice reform work that I do, we have seen substantial shifts in the narrative from tough on crime to people actually want to talk about solutions and police accountability. Never thought that was possible. And and to that corollary, there are things that are legal now in my life that I never thought was possible. I never thought I'd see gay marriage legal. I never thought I'd see a black president. I never thought I'd see a female vice president. I never thought I'd see legal cannabis. Like, there are all these things that are now legal that I never thought I would see. So planting that in the ears of young folks, like, just because it seems impossible today doesn't mean that it ain't happening.
And Brian, did you want to ask them?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably a follow-up. So, well, I mean, I know, anyways. And then, like, I think on that same, and you touched on it a little bit, but I think my question is just sort of directly asking it, like, what is your philosophy or approach to, like, conversion? And what I mean by that is, like, folks who just, like, aren't where you want them to be. I think, like, especially for younger people, there is a tendency to write off, shout down, silence, or sort of whatever, like just not my belief is that you don't cancel, which is an overused term at this point, but that kind of notion of like, we don't actually, if you're not already agreeing with us, go sit over there, we're going to just be the louder, bigger, better hand, which is maybe true at that point for them, but like, to your point, we're in this together, right? And if we're gonna make it through, like, it's gonna require some folks who maybe aren't where we are. How do you approach them with grace without accepting or justifying what they have wrong, right? Without. I think that's. I mean, I struggle with that. I think that's a struggle for folks. Like, I don't want to. Yeah. That's the question.
Yeah. The image, the story I often reference is my own. Meaning, the first time someone asked me to practice yoga and meditation, they said it'll be good for your blood pressure and your anger issues. I responded angrily. I ain't no skinny white chick. Why you boring me with this dumb shit? Right? And left it at that, And so she didn't give up on me. She consistently would be like, here, thought you would enjoy this thing on meditation. Here, thought this. Here, thought this. Blah, blah, blah. The timing just wasn't right for me to see the wisdom of her offering. Right? And so when I hit rock bottom in this horrible job that fired me via text message and stuff, like, that's when I was just like, oh, this yoga meditation thing is supernatural. And so I got into it. But guess who the first person I called was? Her.
Of course.
And was like, look, thank you for telling me about this in 2010. I wish I had listened to you. I'm late as shit, but I'm here. And so the grace that she showed me, the kindness she showed me even when I was awful towards her in response, is part of the reason that I, when it was the right time, said, all right. You're never going to force someone to do what they don't want to do. You're never going to do that. You're never going to shout someone into doing something that they don't want to do. And I can also speak from my teaching practice. Like, I don't force nothing on nobody. I'm like, look, here's what I'm doing. Here's how I'm living. If you want to talk about it, let's talk. If you don't want to talk about it, all right. And that has I just got an email recently from someone who came to the first Black male retreat at Kripalu. They were like, yo, the fact that you didn't force anything on me, like, I'm still unpacking, like, how generous and kind you were, right? You were firm, but you were generous and kind. And, like, that just blew my mind. So just because someone doesn't agree with you, one, that doesn't mean that they won't over time. Two, as someone who made a career in sales and was quite successful at it, sometimes you got to change your approach. If screaming's not working, what else might work? If data's not working, can I tell you a good story? Right? That's more dancing than fighting, right? So, like, if this tactic isn't working, what about this? And if none of them work, then give it time. Because, I know for a fact that over time things can and will and do change. Change is the constant in the universe. And when the time shows up and I'll give you another example. We helped, I was part of the strategic team that helped launch the first impeachment of the former president. We had 4 votes when Rashida said impeach the motherfucker. Like, we had 4 votes. And we had to win over people that were terrified of those votes. And because of pressure and kindness and data and in 1 year we got from 4 to 231. And my colleagues, I used to work at Move On. My colleagues at Move On wanted to take out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling Nancy Pelosi a coward and why is she moving so slow. I went into that meeting and was like, if you do that, you will have a problem because you'll no longer have access to the speaker because I quit. And they were like, she's not moving fast enough. I was like, there is a whole other game that's happening on Capitol Hill right now. And I'm involved in that. So when Nancy Pelosi called the impeachment inquiry in September 2019, you know who one of the first people they called was?
Yeah.
Me. Because I didn't blow them up.
Right.
And when our issue came, I got to help lead the strategy calls.
Yeah.
Right. And our culture, this is the last cultural diatribe I'm going to go on, is that we're addicted to quick wins.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's never
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the whole finance industry is quarterly reports. Like
That's
you're
not
gonna,
natural and it's
Yeah.
not promised.
and it
It
just
takes
doesn't
it
build
takes
institutions. I mean, it's just,
it takes
yeah,
years and it takes decades for a tree to grow. Right? Like
Yeah.
the natural rhythm, like that's why I said earlier, like get in touch with nature. It may take a, but when it happens, it's on time.
Yeah.
So, Reggie, I think my last question is if someone wants to participate in this kind of meditation and yoga practice, how do they do that?
Yeah, I can be found at activepeaceyoga.com. I've taken a vow for I'm really big on vows because it keeps you accountable. My is, is dedicated to inspiration and education. So that's Reggie Global and at Active Peace Yoga on Instagram. I don't really do it because I don't think I'm that important and I think that stuff is boring. But that's where I can be found.
And I think I saw that you were doing a retreat in some center in the Berkshires, one in
Yeah,
September and one in
so
November.
I'm doing a healing retreat for Black men next week, and in November doing a retreat on living your practice. So basically, being purposeful and creating daily rituals so that peace isn't as far away.
All right. Well, that's the podcast for today. Thanks again, Reggie, for joining us. And I mean, we told you guys it was going to be great, and obviously he was super interesting. Mom, any final thoughts, takeaways, things you that stuck out to you?
Well, I think kind of two quotes. One is, and I believe he was quoting Malcolm X, mind your wellness or mind your illness. And I just think at a time when mental illness is an all-time crisis, it's really, an important, it's an important comment for everybody to really take to heart. I also think, for me, he talked about the sake that this kind of journey is to reimagine yourself, to remake yourself as healthy, also creates, as he says, the sacred opportunity to reimagine the world. And, when we're so bogged down with all the bad news and all the challenges, I think just the reminder that what we're doing to create a better world, first of all, is sacred. And secondly, we do need to take the time to reimagine that world, so to make sure that we are grounded and going in the right direction. So I remain inspired.
Yeah, I think for me, the just reframing of the struggle to the dance is just like such a profound mental shift, one that I'm gonna definitely take moving forward, because I think I've often looked at it as a struggle, and the fear-based and the anger and all that stuff resonated with me, certainly. I think I've been motivated more by anger towards things that I've perceived as ills in the world than anything else. And I think he's right about how that framing is not the most sustainable or healthy way. And the dance is such a better way to talk about this stuff. Just it describes what we do, how we do, so much more accurate than a struggle, because it is about how are you stepping in unison with other folks, in contradiction to other folks. There's so much that the dance metaphor works. So I really think that is just like such a strong change. And then just his approach to folks that don't that he's not on the same page with, right? Like he talks about, whether it was sort of bringing down the volume of the protest that he intervened in, or just general that part of the conversation. I think it's so important for us to understand and listen to, because as we become more divided, more divisive, more partisan, and more bubbled, I think the tolerance for people who aren't where we are at has gotten a lot shorter, and I think that's a problem, because we need folks who maybe don't agree with us to agree with us, and we need folks who maybe just don't know what we know to be willing to listen to us, and vice versa. And so I think, if it's a struggle, then it's a conflict. If it's a dance, then it's art. And I think that's kind of, I don't know. That's where I'm going with it after that conversation. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Subscribe to our channel if you liked it. Follow us on TikTok. Follow us on Instagram. And yeah, we appreciate you guys watching and listening, and hope to see you next time.